milestone 8. This is preparing to leave home. And this does not regard your spouse and getting them out of the house. No, somebody hit me up with that joke once. So this session is going to have a little more of a conversational feel for us than if you were here for the last one. So I want to make sure we have time to just kind of talk, because it gets into a little bit less like do this and get this result as you get older, and to more of a relationship sort of based conversation. So when we talk about your kids and preparing to leave home, I just want to say welcome to the longest, most painful time of relational breakup in your lives.
Most painful time of what?
Of relational breakup.
Oh, relational breakup.
Yeah,
it seems like worse more than.
Yeah. Like you've been raising them, you've loved these babies, they've grown up, and now goodbye. Your turn to go live. That's hard. That's hard. So I've heard people talk about the teenage life as it's a long, slow breakup. So it can be very, very challenging. So you're going to get into that. So let's rewind the clock to your teenage years. Let's have a little open suggestions here. But when you graduated, or when you were 16 or 17 getting your driver's license, what were the expectations that you had placed on you by your parents? What were you responsible to do?
Don't get arrested.
Don't get arrested?
For me, it was to help out around the house and stay out of trouble.
Get home alive. Come home alive.
Come home alive?
Yeah.
If you don't come home, there's probably something wrong.
Like we had a big property, so when the leaves would all come down, we'd have a family rig day. It wasn't just like my dad.
Oh,
We
that's
all
great.
did it.
Yeah.
When we shoveled snow, we all shoveled.
In my case, my first time away from home was in the military. So then, after that, when I came back home, I was engaged, and so I never really came back home after the military, because I already had my life kind of planned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. So mine was don't get anybody pregnant. If you go to jail, don't call because you're spending the night. And do your best. Just try to get at least C's, because that's better than what we did. That was the expectations given to me when I was young. It's crazy, right? So, no, I'm the oldest of two. But yeah, those are like the high school expectations. You pay your own car insurance, buy your own car, whatever you need. That's kind of how we did it. So, I mean, there were other household chores. I mean, I have to have the dishwasher unloaded before my mom got home. So I knew exactly how long it would take and exactly when I needed to start to be done. So 2 hours after school before she got home or whatever. That's going on the live stream. So I talked to my mom for a second. I'll try to cut that out. All right, so what expectations then are kids facing today? Let's fast forward. So rewind, look at ours. Now, what have we placed on them today? Maybe not even necessarily your own, but what are things that you hear other parents or other people say, like, make your kids do...
Well, there's certainly a lot of sports scheduling for their free time, so there is no free time.
Do you guys remember like running around the streets, getting your bikes out, striking up a baseball game somewhere, get a kickball game? That doesn't happen anymore. There's no margin for kids. They just one thing to the next. Okay. Sports, homework, eat dinner, maybe a little bit of social chat, bedtime for 3 or 4 hours, and then do it all again, right? It's crazy. It's crazy.
And I know with our children too, some went away to college, some stayed local. It's similar to what Joyce said, the ones that stayed local, they just had to have part-time jobs because they wanted a car. So you got your car and you work on your insurance.
Yeah. There's 2 pages here for the handout. I forgot to give this out to you guys. There's 2 pages there. I don't know if I divided that up equally or not. All right, so you can see the difference. You can see how we were raised, and we saw all the problems that created, and then we've raised another generation the exact opposite, and don't give them any time to do anything wrong, and then they still figure out how to do wrong anyway. Right? So we've got all that contrast, and that's sandwiched in the middle of all the things that need to be done and ready for when they step out of your house and they're oh yeah, there's another.
You need more copies, Chris?
Nope, no, they're coming down.
One more.
I did the stack room.
Oh, okay.
It's coming down. So there's all this stuff that's going on in their lives, and we're kind of managing teenagehood and all those things, and then they graduate and they go off to college, and then all these universities now are struggling with like, what do we do with these underprepared 17, 18-year-old kids that come to us? So they have this huge investment of kind of getting these kids ready to actually do college because they didn't come out really prepared. We see that, from anything, even college into a career, sometimes you're not really prepared. I don't know if anybody truly could be, but I think we've gone after maybe some of the wrong things or some different things, and maybe missed some of the essential things. So we're going to take a look at some of these things here at the top, these core competencies. So what's God's plan for me? Does this include, so does God's plan include dating or marriage? Like, that's a huge question that generations should be asked. These kids, like, do you plan on getting married? What if God asks you to be single? There's a lot of those things. We don't usually put it in that category because it's sort of like the idealized cultural life that everybody's supposed to live. But that may be, God's plan for you may be different. So what's my influence on the world going to be? That's usually not a question I hear students talking about in all of my 20 years of youth ministry. They have notions to do things, but they don't think about it beyond what they want to do or what that would get them. So what will be their impact on the world? And then what do I really believe? Those are pretty significant things. So if you look at that 2 Peter passage there that's on your notes, where we're going to go with this is some of these things. So that's kind of the scripture where we'll camp out. Before we get there, I'll ask you a couple questions. So we're going to do a little more brainstorming, okay? So what does an 18-year-old, a mature 18-year-old, what life skills do they have to have or know in order to be successful in life?
Verbal communication.
Okay, verbal communication.
Electronic communication.
Good. Thank you for saying that. They definitely have become anemic in one, but it's sort of coming back. I don't know if you guys was everybody here for the last session? So we talked a little bit about the technology to this new generation is kind of like rotary phones to us. Like it's just standard. It's just what was there. They don't know life without it. It's been there since they were babies. So significant. So what else? So verbal communication, technology communication.
Social skills and problem solving.
Social skills, problem solving.
Financial understanding.
Financial understanding.
I try to have some work ethic.
Okay.
Productivity, obviously.
Work ethic, value of productivity. This is what they have to be successful, right? We're brainstorming here.
I guess to go along with the social skills, like interpersonal skills with other people, so they can be successful. Well, especially because there's more and more diversity, so they have to be able to see things from other people's standpoint and yet hold their grounds too.
Okay. So put that in the category of interpersonal.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean by that?
And maybe their own value articulation, like what do they value?
Value articulation, good. That's another category. Empathy. Empathy. Okay. Empathy. Good.
Collaboration.
Collaboration.
That's what
Good.
I think like a curiosity or
Yes.
hunger to learn, just keep growing, because you're going to do that the rest of your life. So.
The self-confidence, even as a Christian, to say, what I feel is right, and I don't care what anybody else says.
Good.
Endurance, commitment.
cook.
That's right.
Anybody ever read Catcher in the Rye? Remember Stradlater? You guys remember that story? He's the guy that shaved with the rusty razor and lived in his hallway because he couldn't clean up anything in his apartment.
Oh my gosh.
I don't remember that part.
Is that true? I haven't heard of
I
that.
think that's part of the story.
I think that's one of life skills.
Probably some
Interesting.
personal hygiene.
Hygiene.
How to fix things?
To fix things. It goes along with the problem solving.
Save money.
The what?
Save money.
Save money. Okay. So you're the first group that I've had in this session that went across the line on this one.
Ah.
Right? And I'll share with you what the line is. There's all the practical things of life, but you guys did. You crossed the line into, oh, there's some spiritual articulation. There's some spiritual values that they need to know, right? So we tend to think of kids, we tend to think of them as like, they need to have the bank account, they need to know how to drive, they need to know how to do their laundry, they gotta cook, they gotta be all to do all those basic things of life when they're out of your house because you're not doing them for them. Right? But if we just go to there, we miss the bigger spiritual picture. Right? So when you go to 2 Peter chapter 1, right, it's not this verse that's here, but it's before that verse, but he has given us everything we need for life and godliness. And godliness. But I would challenge us, when you go on a little bit further, Peter gives those qualifications. So add to your faith goodness, goodness knowledge, knowledge self-control. The sixth one in the list is godliness. But he doesn't stop there. He says to your godliness have brotherly kindness, and to that add love. Right? What if the kids that left our homes had everything they needed for life and godliness that transforms them into a loving individual? That's a different vision for leaving home. That's where discipleship kicks in. That's where relationships kick in. That's where their thinking, their development, the way they process. Like if they can come at that from what's the most loving thing for me to do now, begins to shape things a little differently, doesn't it? So that's a significant shift. So talk to me a little bit about the spiritual things that happened in your lives that woke you up to God. And if it's, one of those things you're like, please don't post this online, that's fine. I'll cut it out of the video. So.
Can you say the question again, Chris?
Yeah, so what was going on in your life when you woke up to God?
Someone had given me a Bible, and I started to read it. And I started to recognize that there was something incredible about God. So I think His Word spoke to me. I didn't understand it, a lot of it, but it woke me up to who He was.
Good.
I was raised in a Christian home, but in my early 20s, I joined the Christian touring choir, and people were from all over New Jersey, and so many of those people knew God better than me, and more intimately, and that woke me up. And soon after, changed my church and got into not just the Word, but good Christian, books, and that's what turned me on to God in a deeper way.
Awesome. What else? What was going on when you woke up to that?
I was told not to read the Bible. So I found the Bible one day and I read it anyways.
Defiance!
Do what you're told. Yeah.
That was a psychology trick on you.
Yeah. Go home. No kids, no Bibles allowed in this house. So leave it off your phone so you go read it. I'm kidding.
My parents used to say that, the priest said it.
But the Catholic upbringing, right?
I think I did too.
Anybody else?
For me, it was like, my parents sent us to church. They didn't take us to church, however, we prayed every night at dinner. So I was exposed, but it wasn't until, and we went to church, Jack and I, we came from the same little hometown, same little church. But it wasn't until, like in our 50s, that we were going to a little Presbyterian church in Doylestown where we used to live. And so you know how you're attending, but you don't really know God yet. And at that time, there was this one lady who faithfully prayed over every little thing. And she was the light that burst through. And it was her, her sweetness of saying these like silly little prayers, asking for them in front of the whole congregation. And it seemed like, wow, that sounds so like, but it was her faithfulness that I think just spread to so many people, and her love for Jesus that really brought a light into that church. And that's when God like opened my heart to develop a personal relationship with Him. So thank you.
I would imagine those moments. Anybody else before I talk? Were you gonna say that? You just moved like you were gonna. I would imagine those encounters or those things probably shaped some of the values by which you've gone about doing the rest of your life. Pretty fair to say? Like those encounters, those moments have shaped something of a future for you, even if you didn't know that was coming. Right? Because this happened, now you're different. Right? I want to encourage you, as you're getting your kids ready to leave home, try to get them to have as many of those moments as possible. Something that completely challenges their understanding of the world. So I used to go on about this when I was younger. My mom used to say, like, you think you know everything. You think you know it all. The world doesn't revolve around you, right? You guys heard those phrases? Then it dawned on me a few years after I was on my own that actually at 18, or I was 17 when I graduated high school, at 17, based on my life experience, honestly, I knew it all. From kindergarten through senior year, I lived the same exact cyclical pattern. I knew all the teachers, I knew the process, I knew how to get away with whatever. For what I was living and what I needed, I had what I had and I had it figured out, and I was doing just fine. But I didn't know the world was going to change. Right? So for what your kids are walking through, the cycles and the patterns, they've had that down since they were in 4th grade. So if you want to get them ready to leave home, change up the pattern, change up what they're experiencing. So I'm going to give you some examples of what we do with that to kind of shape those things. So hopefully this will help a little bit. So on the back of your page here, we kind of just bypassed that last question because we kind of went through it. So it's on the second page here. So steps to take to get them ready to leave home. This is a huge value for us as a church. And I think these things will, if you can go after these in a way that shapes the values of your kids, what they value, then I think you're going to see some amazing things on the other side. So the first one is live on mission. This is a huge one for us as a church. This is the first church, I've been in all kinds of different churches, and this is the first church I've been in where we actually have the question or the problem, so to speak, of what do we do with the young adults that are here. Most of the other churches I've been in don't have any because they take off. And we spent countless hours fundraising for youth conferences and other things that were going on that we said, this is worthwhile for your kids to go to. Parents sacrifice the money and pay, and then they graduate and they disappear. And it was like, what is going on? And so I came here, and we do this thing in the summertime called summer ministry. It's a 4-week, maybe sometimes even up to 6-week block where they go into their neighborhoods. They've been trained in different aspects of leading a camp. They go, and it's not vacation Bible school, but they go in and they get face-to-face with little kids in communities that are not in their worldview where they typically live day to day. Sometimes they are, but like sometimes not. And from that, like all of these young adults that have stayed in our church went through that. That's not a coincidence. The young adults that have disappeared did not, unless they got married and moved out. That's huge. Living on mission is a gigantic thing. So some of the students that I've had over the years that did stay with it were students I took on mission trips. So we did a mission trip in my last church. We called it M4. So we said we're going to do Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. So we did a local, We went to Buffalo, we went to New York City, and we went to Peru. And you know what we did on all 4 trips? Paint. Paint. That's all we did. So I tried to walk them through that process. We're painting roof tiles for a building in Peru, and I'm like, guys, what's the difference between painting this and painting the skate park at home? Nothing. Like, mission's right outside your door. You don't have to fly to another country to do it. Just kind of shaping that, right? Because one of the goals that I had for me as a youth pastor is I wanted to mess up their worldview. I wanted to mess up their preconceived idea of this is how this school year is going to go, A, B, C, and D, and then I get all these accolades or whatever. I wanted to mess them up. Sometimes I mess them up good, sometimes not maybe, but when you see that light bulb go on for the kingdom, a whole different perspective. So I had some other guys we went to New York on that trip. For probably a good 45 minutes, they were riding the escalators up and down in Toys R Us. It was like a 3 or 4 story store in Times Square, and then just like ride up, and we go back down, back down, back down. I said, what are you doing? And they're like, dude, there's no escalators where we live. This is awesome, right? And I dawned on me, like, oh yeah, we don't have any escalators in our town, right? It messed up their worldview. They're like, oh, people live differently than what I know, because we tend to take what we think we know and then build a construct that we expect everybody else to fit in. That's challenging, right? That's the beauty of the kingdom, is that grace enables something different. The gospel brings something different. So if you can get them into that place where you expose them to living on mission, finding places to serve, being in different teams, encountering people that are not like them, you begin to adjust the value set that they have. That life's not all for me. That life's not all what I can amass. That makes sense? So we tend to think of what makes a successful person. What's self-sustaining, good 401k, they're ready to retire when the time comes. That's not kingdom. So Jesus said, whoever wants to be my disciple must give up everything he has. Right? That's a surrender clause. That comes after the story where he says, if a giant army goes against a small army, they'll see they can't win it. So they send out a delegate to say, what are the terms of peace so you don't destroy us? The next verse is, you have to surrender. You're surrendering all that you think you have to Jesus, and he gives you everything he has. It's not a loss. We've got to lead that value charge. Mission kind of puts that into practice. So get your kids in missional stuff. Take a family mission trip. Not vacation. Right? I just read an article recently about a church that went to Hawaii to minister to some homeless people in Hawaii, and their church is like 6 blocks from a homeless shelter. I'm like, guys, just go down the street. Why spend all the money? Right? I mean, let's be honest. We're in New Jersey. There's plenty of opportunities. So I know some of you maybe know this from our district, right? So there's that. I don't think. Do I have the world map up here anywhere? Let me take it down. You guys know the 1080 window? Heard of that in mission? It's all the creative access countries that we previously didn't have access to, and now there's some access to those. They found that most of the countries that are represented in that window have some sort of representation in New York City area. So people come from there, find Jesus here, and then they go back home. And they take the gospel with them. That's such a much more efficient way of doing mission than like sending all the white people over to change everything, right? It's a huge difference. So that's right here in our backyard. It's amazing. It's amazing. We can help you guys get connected with that, but that's a big thing. All right, so number 2, creating a testimony. This is a big one. If you can lead your kids to that place that we talked about in the last session of a crisis of faith, where they say, Jesus is really my Lord. How did they come to that? How did they come to that decision? It's a significant thing. So we talked about that before here, but creation, so it'd be like a 4-step story, so to speak. So creation, this is where I come from. The fall, so this is my realization of my sin. There's some redemptive aspect of knowing Jesus, something that brings some change, which now brings about the potential of a new creation. You're living differently. So I want to encourage you. So this is something that our church planner in Bridgeton said recently. It was something that was kind of eye-opening for me in a way. So I apologize if this is me on my soapbox. But he was talking about tribes in Papua New Guinea that when they're at hostility with each other, the way in which they resolve that hostility is they each give a baby to the other tribe. And as long as that child is alive, there's peace between the tribes. So a missionary went there and took that cultural parallel and said, as long as Jesus is alive, there can be peace. Right? But then I look at American Christianity, I think, well, if a missionary came here, what would be the common thing that they could find to teach us? It's only commerce. Right? I remember back in the day when I first started youth ministry, there were churches giving out little credit cards with Jesus' name on them, like to illustrate how much debt of sin you've racked up, and Jesus will pay it off. I thought, man, that's not the same thing as like, as long as this baby's alive, there can be peace. Right? We've got to get them into that level of a story. Not just a transaction, but like a real relationship, a real reality. So helping them create that story. And now that poses a good challenge for us as parents, because when do we tell our kids our story? Without any manipulation or shades of appropriate honesty for their age. But when we really pull back the curtain and say, this was me before you came. They need to hear your story on that. Because their story is not just theirs. Like, they may have a completely different worldview and a completely different life because of what God did in you. And if they can see that wow, God rescued me before I even came along because he saved you, that's a beautiful legacy to pass on. So open up that story. Get into that testimony. Make sense? All right, another one, obviously, Bible study or biblical literacy. This is a significant one. I love this stuff. So Rick Lawrence was here a couple years ago. He's the editor of Group Magazine. I'd say a fairly popular youth ministry, resource. So he did some research on different scriptures and found out there was no scriptures that were written that have, no translations made of scripture that captured all of the Old Testament references about Jesus. So they went back and made one. So they combed through it all, did it all. It's called the Jesus-Centered Bible. It's on your resource sheet there. I would encourage you to get one of those for your kids. I don't think they're like $20 or something, but all the references to Jesus in the Old Testament are highlighted in blue, and then all the words of Christ in red, and then the times it refers to Christ in the epistles is all in red as well. So it's pretty much a red New Testament when you see it. But I would encourage you to do that one. They have some other stuff here, so like the Jesus-Centered Life. It's 40 devotionals for teenagers that are fantastic. I have these little question cards. So these are questions to kind of get kids talking about Jesus. So I'll just give you one. So we tend to think most people we know are going to heaven, but Jesus said, "For the gate is small and the way is narrow that leads to life, and few of those who find it." So why would Jesus say so few people are really headed for eternal life with God? Boom, that's a big question. There's like 50 of these in here. So you can get that. There's all kinds of stuff. So like one of the questions he likes to put out there is like, is Jesus nice, fierce, or mysterious? It just prompts that question. Like, you got to get it talking. Like, these are fantastic questions to bring to your kids. There's also a book out there for you on this called The Jesus-Centered Life. Rick has a podcast called Paying Ridiculous Attention to Jesus. This is something Jesus said. Let's unpack that. Right? So the more you grow in Christ, the more you're going to have roots to help your kids grow in Christ. Right? So I'm not one that subscribes to that old leadership thing that you can't lead people any further than you've gone. I think what's more true is that you can't lead people any further than you're willing to go. Right? So I don't have to have been there first to show you. But I can say, let's go there together and let's see what we find. So press in. Invite your kids into that. Like, hey, what if we sat down and just talked about Jesus a little bit? Once a week. Like, just you and me. Like, I'll respect your opinions. I won't try to over answer anything, but I just want to hear what you think about this. Right, so Bible study, biblical literacy, going after that. There's obviously courses and those kinds of things that you could do. Another big one, so part of this theme, right? Prayer and discussion over their romantic future. I don't think there's ever been a generation on the planet that has so much confusion over this issue as it exists right now. Mm-hmm. So talk to them about it. Talk to them. I don't care what you call it. I don't care if you call it dating. I don't care if you call it courting. But however you talk about it in your family, talk to your kids about purity. Talk to them about what story they're going to give to their future spouse. This is an Andy Stanley thing from years ago. They said everybody has one of three stories. 1, I waited for you, you're my first. 2, I didn't wait for you, but then I got my head on straight, so I waited after that. Or 3, hey, I'm still sleeping around. You sure you want to be with me? Mm-hmm. Right? They're going to have one of those 3 stories. So talk to them about that process. Talk to them about the nature of self-sacrifice in a relationship. So many people get into relationships because they look at it for what this is going to do for me or this is what I can get out of it. Mm-hmm. But, to steal the old C.S. Lewis quote, right? Like the best marriage looks like a crucifixion. Right? Like if you're not ready to get bloody, you're not ready to kiss that girl or that boy. If you're not ready to get bloody, this is probably not the best thing for you right now. Talk about the purpose of dating. Are you ready for that? Are you ready if they have some outlandish views, right? And you got to put them in places, again, that are going to shape the values that go behind that. Because whatever they value, they will chase down. So when they're little, this is what we're doing because mom and dad said it. Mm-hmm. Now you're growing up. What's going to govern your life? You're going to live it based on your values. So the other one, obviously, is just leverage your moments. So this comes all the way back for me, back to where forming a home starts with Deuteronomy 6. Talk about these things when you walk along the road, when you lie down, when you get up, when you sit. Right? It comes back to that even here at the end. That pattern of things is what you need to continue doing. So I'll give you 4 examples of. So one is drive time. We don't really walk along the road very much. We tend to drive everywhere. When you get in the car, take their phone. I know that's crazy. We say, hey, we're going to put our phones here in the cup holder for a little bit. I just want to talk about it. They're not going anywhere. Right. You've got a captive audience, and the faster you drive. No, I'm kidding. Right? They're not going anywhere. You're in the car together. Yeah. What if you spent those times saying, hey, I got a question about something to think about. What do you think? Leverage that. Drive time. Meal times, obviously. I know they've talked a lot about like the nature of how family dinner and those kinds of things has huge family impact. So it's a fantastic thing to do. Depending on the speed and pace of your life, that may not always be practical, but if it's not dinner, it can be breakfast. If it's not that, surprise your kids at school with lunch one day. I know that might be awkward for them, but take them out for the day. Say, hey, I'm going to pick you up for lunch today. We're just going to go talk. Mm-hmm. Right? You have more opportunities than you realize sometimes. So drive time, meal time, obviously bedtime. Bedtime when I was a kid was like, it's 9 o'clock, go to bed, shut your light off. Right? Sometimes it needs to be that way. Like, that can extend on for like 3-4 hours. Like we read 5 stories, you're still not tired. We play games, you still won't go to sleep. Right? But every night, what if you prayed for your kids with them? You can still do that. Say, hey, before you go to bed, I'm just going to pray for you. You don't even have to ask them. Just put your hand on them. Like, dear Jesus, please help Sally today. Or, you have that right as the parental authority in your home. Not that I'm saying do that like in a negative way, but hey, I'm just going to pray for you right now. Say, hey, see these things going on with your friends. I just want you to know I'm praying for you. Tell them that. It's huge. And I encourage, especially those of you who are dads. I think I said this in our church services one time, but I've heard a lot of stories of young men who kind of were sneaking out of the house or doing things they weren't supposed to do, and then they sneak back in the house at night so they're not going to get caught. They kind of creep by mom and dad's bedroom and they hear mom praying, and it kind of gets a hold of their heart. You've heard those stories. I've never heard anybody say, yeah, I heard my dad pray. Like, pray for your kids. It's huge. So that bedtime time, obviously morning time before they're going to school. Hey, what's on your agenda for today? Let's make sure we don't forget Jesus in that. Have those conversations. Bring it up. The sooner that you can bring these up, like these aren't like when you get to 18, now let's start talking about it. Like so as early as you can, start forming that. So what we hopefully in this process, when we start out with those things when you're little, so talk about these things when you drive, meal times, bedtimes, morning times. If you start that even when they're little, then when you get to 17, 18, it's not foreign. It's just the norm. It's how we do it. It's our culture and our home. Right? So we still pray with my kids at bedtime. We always pray at meal times when we're together. Sometimes we're not always together. Every morning when I drop my kids off for school, I pray for them. We have those things. We used to walk to the bus stop on the road. We were literally walking on the road. Hey, what do we see today? You know, sometimes we make them shut their things off. All right, guys, let's look at what God created. Put it out there. And we're doing that when they're little. We're going to keep doing that when they're 15, 16, 17. Because those things don't stop. Right? So, slow down enough. Slow down enough to leverage the moment. Okay? Don't be afraid to hit the brakes once in a while. Okay? All right, so those are some of my things. The other thing I'm going to encourage you to do, we'll just pass those around. I think it's just one page. One of the other things I love to challenge students on, especially if any of you have seniors and you're going into this year, I rarely ever hear a student that's graduating articulate to me a spiritual plan for their life. Like we've taught them the gospel. I've made them memorize 2 Timothy 2:8 since they hit youth group. Remember Jesus Christ raised from the dead, descended from David. This is my gospel. It's a huge verse. It's one of my favorites. And I hear them go on to graduate. Yeah, I'm going to here. I'm going to the military. I'm going to go work. I'm going to go do this. Very seldom do I ever hear a kid say, yeah, this is how I'm going to stay healthy spiritually. So I give them this little document, help them walk through this a little bit. So I want you to have that. It's a huge conversation. So when you go off to college, where are you going to go to church? Right? When you go off to college, who's going to hold you accountable? When you go off to college, who are you going to talk to when the professor tells you that everything is relative? Or that nothing is really true? Right? Those are big. So help your kids craft a spiritual plan for their lives. That's a major, major, major step. Ask them about it. Help them with it. Get them to, we talked in the last session about having 5 committed non-parental adults to every kid. Ask those guys to help. Right? Because we don't want them to have that solid upbringing disappear for 20 years and then come back when they have kids because they feel like, oh, now I really don't know it all. Right? It's big. All right, so Q&A. Anything like that? I'm going to put a couple scriptures on there for you, but I should tell you that one. When I train students, right and wrong comes up a lot. So is this right to do or is this wrong to do? So I stole this from Andy Stanley, but I try to get them not to ask that question or not to make it the primary question. Like some things are clearly wrong, some things are clearly right, but if it's not, and we just leave that question there, then what are we going to do? We're going to take our brokenness and we're going to justify that it's right for us because it's technically not that bad, or it's technically not that wrong. It's a gray area. We'll always tend to choose what serves us. So I really, really press on them. These are good questions for you guys to ask your kids. Like, is that wise? Not really sure if it's right or wrong, but is that wise for you? Makes sense? Is that a wise choice? So I think that's where that verse is there, down at the bottom. But that whole aspect of putting on wisdom, of getting that knowledge, that's big. So anyway, so challenge your kids on wisdom, not just right or wrong too. So that's a huge value thing for me. So. All right, so Q&A, guys. Let's talk about it. Have you seen any examples of this? Does any of this hit to what happened in your story? I mean, I heard some of those things when you guys were putting out some of your stuff. Obviously getting the word that you said, Amy, said that biblical literacy was a huge catalyst for you. Those relationships with other believers, you said, Jane, like those are huge aspects. People that leverage moments with you. Like, can you see these kind of? So I guess what I'm saying is try to lead your kids with those values to get them ready to leave. So
I will say that I applied more to my 2 younger ones about praying every day, every night. And now my 14-year-old tells me, I can't sleep, Mom, unless you pray with me. And I'm like, what? And I drop what I'm doing and I fly over there. But in addition to that, I'll say, is there something you want me to pray for? And I'll pray for it. And maybe months, weeks later, maybe months later, years later, I'll say, there'll be an answer to prayer. I'll say, God, thank you. We've been praying for X, Y, and Z. And God, because of you, you answered our prayer. And and they're like, Mommy, yeah, you did answer our prayer. So it leads to them realizing that sometimes it takes days, sometimes it doesn't happen at all, sometimes it takes weeks, months, that they've seen that. And
that's awesome.
so that was really encouraging. Mommy, we need to pray. I'm like, sure, So even at 14 or whatever, they still look for it. That's awesome.
I know your kids do. It's so cool to hear. Awesome. Any other thoughts? Any questions?
How do you go from introducing your children to sexuality, especially in this day and age, to then broaching marriage and so forth? So almost the withholding of sexuality, and then drawing them into it. And I ask the question because people getting married later and later are just not at all. So how do you bridge that chasm? Like how do you just walk them through that?
Yeah, I think the first step obviously is in the parental role, you have to get over the fear of it. Like this was several years ago here, but it came up. Somebody said something in the middle school group that crossed the line for some parents. So I started asking questions like, why is this so crazy for you? And I started asking kids, even high school students, like, hey, when did your parents talk? And they're like, we never talked about it. Like one kid said, my parents gave me like a little paper and said, read this and let me know if you have any questions. So I think we've got to go after it. For my kids, the issues about some of this have come up as early as 3rd grade. So waiting until they hit puberty or those kinds of things, it doesn't work. So if you think that they don't know yet, you're probably lying to yourself. They probably know long before you even thought about having the conversation, just depending on where they go to school or whatever.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we've done is talk to them about what's beautiful and then what makes it not beautiful. So it's beautiful in this way, it's beautiful in this context. When it's not, it becomes very destructive and disruptive and manipulative, self-serving, like you can go into all those things. So they're going to have to come to that place, like whether you want them to or not, they're going to have to choose. So we're encouraging our kids, like, choose what's beautiful, not what's nasty.
Hey, how about wedding planning? I noticed that's another big thing that's changed. A lot of people we've seen, parents have the expectations like from our generation and how it was with the mom having a big hand in planning and everything to the generation that's coming up. Here's the day and the time and how much you owe.
Yeah. But how are you going to pay for that then? No, I'm kidding. Yeah, that's why. Yeah, we paid for our own, so that's crazy. I think again that comes down to values and expectations. So I would say even before engagement happens, try to put that into conversation ahead of time. So I've got 3 daughters, so every time that comes up, it's like, oh man, you're gonna be so broke. I don't know if we are or not, but like let's talk about that as we go along. Now if you're already on the other side of that fence, obviously there's the issues of boundaries and expectations, and you clarify what you need. But that's one of those things. I don't know. Some of that's a family dynamic issue too. So I'd probably refer you to somebody like Tammy, who's a counselor on managing those family dynamics. Because my mom could be a very controlling person, so we purposely said, no, we're not going to have you do any of that. Just here's what we'd like you to do. So we didn't want unnecessary, needless conflict over somebody's expectations. So getting them out in the open, I don't know. That's our church slogan, right? Let's talk about it. So that's a joke, but the sooner you talk about it, I think the better off you'll be. You're going to manage those expectations. So hope that's helpful. It's not a direct answer like do this and you'll get this. I don't know if it works that way, but anybody else want to speak to that one?
I used to videotape weddings in my past, and after a few of all that loud music, and you couldn't hear anybody talking, and it was like, my daughter was in high school at the time, and I'm like, I am just buying the ladder, putting it up at her window, and she can go a loop. I am not paying a lot of money for a bunch of people to have a good time and be loud that you can't even hear each other talking. But it was a funny
That's fun.
It was awful.
Cool.
So, having done a lot of this, not quite perfectly, and not quite as thoroughly as we would hope with our older two, and having one of them just kind of, he moved out and he's in an environment, where there's more worldly views on things. So, I think my question is, he's being exposed more towards, especially with regards to the sexuality and how people view sexuality and what the norm is for that particular environment. How do you help reinforce some of the values that he's learned or she's learned at a younger age from afar, from a distance?
I'm not tracking your question.
Yeah.
So, how do you help to kind of, realign them with some of the things that they've learned that maybe they haven't heard for a while, or they're being exposed now to the worldly views on certain things.
Okay, so the current exposure is undermining what was taught.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you reinforce what was
Yeah,
taught?
I mean, obviously you can't control that. I'm not looking to control it, but maybe what are some ways to introduce?
I'll answer this with a little story.
Yeah.
That's okay. So, you guys remember the last presidential election? You see any of those conversations? Even the one before that, when Joe Biden was vice president, was debating Paul Ryan. All those. You guys remember some of those? Anybody see those?
Probably.
Okay. I'll just tell you what I saw. Joe Biden never articulated a single position during the debate. All he did was trash the Republican view. That's so stupid. Or how could they think that? Excuse me. So, if we're gonna get on the other side of that conversation, we have to know where to ask the right questions or the right thing. I don't think we have to be super great at defending our view. Like, our view is biblical. It's not really up for question. Like, God has given that. That's where we stand. And we don't have to defend that because God's word doesn't come back void. Like, he's going to carry that. We don't have to. But I think if we go in with a empathetic, sympathetic, understanding heart that's not necessarily permission giving, but can find the errors or can find the spots and then just put the right question on it, all those views tend to implode very quickly. So that's as far as the argument and debate of the issue. But then on the people side of the issue, I tend to find that anybody that's struggling with transgender or homosexuality typically has a very deep male wound of some kind. And so I try to go there and I try to unpack. So you came to this conclusion, how? Like, help me understand your story. So if you can enter it in that way without saying, oh yeah, dude, you're free to do whatever you want, you go for it. But say, dude, how did that happen? Like, what happened that you chose that? So I still believe it's people's choice. And people tend to make choices based on their hurt. I don't buy that. I mean, again, so that's like You know, if it was a genetically transmitted issue, we could find it and we could eradicate it by selective breeding or whatever. Not that that's a prescribed method, but somebody will try it if they can find it, but they can't find it because it's not from that. So there's, like, we got to slow down and kind of think what we're hearing people say, so kind of get on the other side of that. So that's a, I don't know, that's a Ravi Zacharias thing, I think. So if you can understand the motive behind the question, you're already on the other side of the answer. That's very philosophical and deep. I'm sorry.
Yeah, gosh, that's one of the nice things about getting old. You know, you can look back over your 70 years and see just how the Lord, in spite of yourself, how the Lord blessed you and have His way, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Praise God.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I don't know. Add to other questions. I go into questions with people on those things too. What about the next generation? Like the need for a mother and a father figure in your life. So there's like the scientific data on that stuff just collapses that whole theory. You know,
I think it's
even
more
apart from scripture. So.
Yeah, no, I don't know if it's this eternal conflict. It's just a general acceptance of, or you know, general acceptance of what, you know, how lifestyles are okay or not. You know, oh, it's okay. You know, I mean, they are the way they are. And,
You know what, Ed, I think that comes from too, and I'm just gonna sound liberal, but this is where I've been living some, is that I feel like in the church we say, no, it's wrong, but we have no clue why. It's wrong. Well, why? That's the question I get a lot.
Yeah.
Because God says so. Where? We don't know. And we haven't even dug into like the depth of the scripture. God says it, I believe it, that's fine, but that's not going to satisfy. The kids are looking at us like, okay? Because it's really, it mirrors what the world is doing. This is how I feel, this is how I'm going to live. Well, you're a Christian, this is how you feel, this is how you're going to live. Mirror. You know, so, you know, a lot of times, I mean, some of my most disturbing sessions in the last year have come from dealing with a kid who was transgender, identified as transgender, but had very Pentecostal family, and the church, their church told this kid, when you're really like a man, you come back, because in this house of God, you're a man. Kid was like, I cannot wait to get out of this house. And I would say, like, dude, are you sure this is like the way you want it? Like, are you, like Chris said, slow down, like just slow down, because you got, like he said the last session, you got all those developmental stages coming, you know. But a lot of times we don't know what we're saying. If we're honest, as the church, we really don't know what we're saying. I mean, and I know that ruffles feathers, but like,
I agree with you. No, I agree wholeheartedly with you.
I mean, I can tell Romans 1 says,
Yeah.
okay, but like, what was happening in the church of Rome, you know, the Roman church at the time, or what was, you know, and it's out, books are out there. And there are churches now who say that it's not just okay to be homosexual or trans, but it's okay to get ordained.
Right.
So if you're in the cities, you know, if you're in the cities or even in the South, you're coming up on churches where that's totally fine.
Yeah.
So now what do? Oh, this is what we believe. But what? That's why I come back to, like, my house. I'm always going, but why? But why? But I mean, I don't. This is the first time I'm saying it out loud, you know, in the church setting. But like, why, like that's where I'm at. Like, why do I believe this? Yes, God said that might be okay for me, but if I'm going to help other people, why? Because if you look at any of the material, they're taking the same scriptures against, and they're using them for. Now what? You got 4 for scriptures, 4 without. Like, so that I think that's probably some of what you know, maybe the kids are dealing with. I mean, I have kids come in my room and they'll tell me the scriptures. Hey, this is what I'm reading. Me and my parents are fighting about this. You know, you get that a lot in youth ministry. My parents and I are fighting about this.
Right.
You know, and it's not just the sexual stuff. Like I had a kid who came in with their parent and they said, I'm fighting with my mom this morning because I believe that what Todd White says is we don't ever have to sin again, and my mom's saying we have to sin because we're not like God, we're not like Jesus. You know, so like, well, what do we believe on that? You know, like, so I think it's important for us to do more than just the Bible says, and here's the verse, because heck, anybody can go on Google now.
Yeah.
You know, look up verses for, yes, it's just, I think we gotta go deeper and then apply it.
I feel badly that society has really, like, the liberal people have really pushed the agenda of the what's it called? I don't wanna say gay rights.
LGBT.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
You know, like, it's almost like advertised. You know, it's not like it's just part of life or society. It is being pushed right in our faces, and I really personally resent it because I think for our children and the lives that we're trying to lead and be godly, and Bible or not Bible, it's what, you know, like, I believe in the Bible and that's what I believe. And I don't want to be them pushing it in my face any more than maybe some of them don't want me to push it in their face. But on the other hand, I just think that it's just gone so far over the edge of respect. When, you know, for example, when Obama lit up the White House with the gay flag. I mean, what was that all about?
It was so offensive.
Like, wasn't that like just trying to make everybody say this is okay and this is the way the world's going to be turning? And it was just like really hard. And I just feel like even in schools they have their LGBT clubs, which is now promoting children to say, oh gosh, I thought I was normal, but maybe I'm not. Well, you probably are normal, but now you're being influenced to maybe be not. And I just really, really feel badly that society, and I don't think we Christians, like, you know, like, are strong enough to stand up. And of course, if you try to, you're going to be shot down anyway. So it's just like in a really terrible, vulnerable position. And, you know, I'm still going to believe what I believe, despite, like, they might say the Bible says this, I'm going to still say, you know, my God says this. And that's what I'm going to stand up for and believe. And I just really don't want to get in a conversation with anybody about it, because I don't really know the Bible that well to support my beliefs, except what's in my heart. And I don't like to argue with people. You know, I'm not going to be, try to push my agenda. But I just really, really resent that my grandchildren now, not the two families that are Christian based, but my other family, you know, like they like want to start an argument with me over the fact that I don't believe in Target, you know, the bathroom policy, how I'm still boycotting Target because of their bathroom policy 2 years ago. And, you know, and they just stand up for like what they think their rights are. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, or it's just like that young generation, 15-year-olds say, you know, they're strong-willed already. And it's like, you can't probably really say anything because they have to get past that stage, but they're going to be influenced by all their peers that it's the right thing, or this is the worst case. So the other side of the family that's going to say it's fine. So it's really such a struggle. It's awful. So God and prayer, and then you hope by the end, you know, you hope and pray they go through whatever they have to go through, but then they're going to say, but God is right. You know, like my faith is in Jesus Christ, because they're going to have to take this crazy journey along the way. So I'm sorry.
Sure. I mean, I'd encourage you, I mean, if it's something that is prevalent, or you find yourself engaging it frequently, remember the scriptures that we destroy lofty arguments, take every thought captive. But there's the caution of don't get caught in useless debates. Right? So I think you'll be able to gauge, if you listen to the Spirit, you'll gauge which one to enter into and when. But I also think if we're going to follow that methodology, so to speak, of destroying lofty arguments, like, you just need good questions and good listening skills. Because I would remind us, like, any sin, no matter what it is,
right?
Greed, whatever, that whole list of, you know, that includes homosexuality. When I taught on this in our church, it was homosexuality is the only one in that list that anybody wants to redeem as a positive identity. Nobody wants to be redeemed as greedy, you know, self-centered. Like, it's the only one in our culture that people are trying to claim as a good one. But we have to remember, like, all sin leads to the same place. Right? It always breaks down. It
Yes.
always leaves hurt. It always leaves pain. Pay attention to that. Right? The gospel has to come to that.
Good.
It's not so much the argument point, right? That's up here. There's a worship piece behind it. If you get past the question, you find out what's going on there. So that's a really long answer.
No,
Yeah. All right, guys, we're out of time. So can I pray for you? You know, we've got another session, and then I think that's it for the Parent Summit 2019.
Wow.
That's crazy, right?
Is the main session now?
Yeah. You guys think you have a quick refreshment bathroom break? And then we can go from there. So we're moving up in the world, guys. Last time I did this session, we did it in a closet off the side of the sanctuary. So thank you guys for coming. So, keep going. Keep journeying.
Thanks for your preparation.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Let me pray for you guys. Jesus, when I think about parenting and I think about the sort of like end of the kids being in the home and this moment where we have to raise them up so they'll leave, so that they go into hopefully what you have prepared for them. I think of it as like a relay race, like we've been running and we're completely exhausted, but now we've got to hand that baton off, and we've got to give every last bit we have to hand it off. So I think of the scripture, let us run the race that's marked out for us with endurance. So God, would you give these parents the endurance to finish this leg of the race? Would you refresh their hearts, refresh their souls? God, would you inspire moments, replan vacations, open up windows of opportunity that mission can become a normal family value, that it would activate faith inside our kids, and that they would see that there's more to life than whatever they see. So I want to just ask for an equipping in that, a filling of your spirit to prepare these kids that we have been entrusted with to walk with you and to leave home to live with you. So I ask for your help in that, God. In Jesus' name. Amen.